So, as some of you are aware, I have recently gotten way into outdoor activities, whether it's hiking or rafting or just going out and hugging a tree. I don't know why I am finally discovering nature in my life, but at this point in my life, I think nature is just the coolest thing ever, and I want to spend as much time as I can out there. And it turns out sometimes when you go down a river, if you're rafting, it may actually look cool, calm, and just easy waters. And then as you're getting over there, somebody's waving at you, going, don't come over here, and encouraging you to go toward the other side of the river. Why? Because underneath, you might learn, subsequently, there are rocks that are under there. Sometimes things aren't always as they appear, as I've learned. Sometimes there's more complexity to a situation. In fact, we may actually even have to use the word nuance when embracing and looking at situations. Just because something looks one way, upon deeper reflection, we recognize that a complexity exists. Well, that's kind of a challenge for us. We live in an age where, I don't know about you, if you're ever on TikTok or social media, you can swipe right, you can swipe left, you can click if you like it. All you need is a meme. And if you're on TikTok, 60 seconds or less, and you will get all of the information about any specific idea. Just ask some of the creators, and they can provide for you a plethora of ideas in 60 seconds, right? Well, the truth is, as you and I know, 60 seconds is not a lot of time to cover in-depth conversations of complicated topics. It might appear simple on the surface, and yet underneath, there's all sorts of life activities and rocks occurring. And if we allow ourselves to slip in the dangerous path of simply going down without recognizing the complexity and the nuance, we may get snagged. Oi, if you thought that only nature provides it or social media exacerbates it, I'll remind you about studying some Talmud. In fact, studying Talmud requires a few rules. I remember learning in Talmud class about ilu ve'ilu divrei Elohim chayim. This words and those words are the words of the living God. I remember one of my professors taught this. Why is this word and that word the word of the living God? Well, this concept was that not one rabbi had the answer. In fact, multiple people had the answer. And if you look at a Talmud page itself, you'll recognize that it is very challenging to at times follow who's making what argument, where they are at, and even you'll see that sometimes people may appear to flip-flop as they go through the argument, because it turns out when you have in-depth dialogue taking place, you may, in fact, if you are open, change your opinion on a specific topic. And if you thought that I might be heading in the political realm, I'm really not. I want to talk about our story in the Parsha this week, the story of Balaam and Balak. When we think about the story of Balaam, I'll remind you that this is the time where we're dealing with a prophet that's not an Israelite prophet, and we're dealing with a talking donkey that occurred before we even saw the movie Shrek. In this case, we have the story of Balaam. Now, this story attests both to the literary history of the text according to Jacob Milgrom, but more than the fact, and why is it, that Jacob Milgrom points out that there was a literary history of Balaam. Not only is he a famous rabbi and he's mentioned famous rabbi, famous prophet, and he's mentioned extra biblically, but there appears to have been actually two different stories in the Bible. In some cases, we see that Balaam was considered a faithful servant of God, and he would not have even dreamed of cursing the Israelites without God's consent. He also, on the flip side, sought to curse Israel without God's permission. And we see that at one point God was angry at Balaam for going on his journey to curse the Israelites, even though God apparently had previously permitted Balaam to go on this very same journey. And so the suggestion by Jacob Milgrom is that there may have been contradictory traditions about how do the people who wrote the Bible in fact look at Balaam. Was he doing it because God encouraged him to curse the Israelites on behalf of the Moabite king? Was he doing it because he was just a not very nice guy? Well, I can't give you a complete and final answer, but whoever redacted the Bible definitely included the story where Balaam was on a donkey, the donkey decided to stop, the donkey wandered off 3 different times because there was an angel in the way, and we can see Balaam and imagine him hitting the donkey. Why is the story in there? Well, it's kind of a parody. If he's supposed to be a prophet of God, how could this prophet of God miss an angel of God right in front of him? Even their silly donkey could see the angel of God. So we can kind of get an idea that the biblical author, whoever redacted, did in fact have a negative opinion. The rabbis too picked up on the fact that there is a contradiction in the Bible itself. When in the Mishnah they emphasize Balaam as evil and they call him the wicked, dun, 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 and that he has forfeited a spot in the world to come. Whereas there's a different midrash, on the other hand, that has and credits Balaam with having great and tremendous wisdom, kind of like Moses. Well, what does all of this teach us about the contradictory nature? It means that whoever thought and attempted to contemplate how do we remember Balaam wasn't exactly clear. They didn't have, the opinion wasn't finalized. The rabbis making their commentary didn't either have a finalized opinion. And what does that say about us? Well, that means that there can be multiple opinions when we look at an event, or when we choose to contemplate how we're going to remember something, or how we're going to talk about it. Even maybe how we're going to talk about it with ourselves. And so I want to invite you to push against the urge that we all have to allow ourselves down that social media trail and say yes, like, no, not like, good, bad, black, white, and recognize that in our history, in our tradition, we have a very strong ethic of looking at nuance, complexity, not allowing our eyes to be tricked by the gentleness of the river, but wanting, in fact, to explore and accept that there are always rocks underneath. Shabbat Shalom.